My wife, Melissa, always wore her feminism like a badge of honor. She could give TED Talk-worthy speeches about independence, empowerment, and not depending on a man for anything. But somehow, all those principles seemed to fade into the background once we got married, replaced with entitlement and disdain. I learned the hard way that she was all about theory, never practice. When she stopped showing up in our relationship, emotionally and physically, I made a decision. I stopped enabling her. What followed after that shattered the perfect image she'd carefully constructed for everyone around us. I met Melissa during my 3rd year at community college. I was focused on earning my associates in construction management while juggling a part-time job at a local lumberyard to cover tuition and living expenses. Every weekday felt like a battle, studying, working, hustling, repeating. I didn't have the time or energy for dating, let alone the money, but fate had its plans. Melissa was a 32-year-old senior at the nearby state university. Tall, lean, with this cascade of chestnut hair and eyes that seemed to catch the light just right. She was the kind of woman you'd expect to see dating a stockbroker, not a blue-collar guy hauling plywood in steel-toed boots. She was finishing a double major, in women's studies and business administration. Not just book smart, she had a way of commanding every room she walked into, like she knew her worth and expected the world to keep up. Our paths crossed on her campus when I was delivering lumber and drywall to the construction site for the new student center. She walked by in yoga pants, latte in hand, and gave me the kind of smile that made my stomach tighten. When she stopped to ask about the project, I half expected her to be patronizing or dismissive. Instead, she was warm, curious, flirtatious, and even. That spark turned into our first date a week later. I took her to this family-owned Italian joint, tucked between a laundromat and a liquor store. Real old-school place, red checkered tablecloths, and a grandma who still made the pasta by hand. I thought it was charming. She called it quaint, which I later realized was code for beneath her. She spent a good portion of the evening talking about this high-end rooftop bar where important people go to network, as if to subtly remind me where she belonged. But she laughed at my stories, leaned in close when I spoke, her fingers brushing my forearm like electricity. I was hooked. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot. Throughout that time, she talked non-stop about her ambitions, breaking glass ceilings, revolutionizing corporate culture, and rising to the top without sacrificing her identity. I was all in. I believed in her. I picked up extra shifts to help her afford grad school application fees. I listened as she rehearsed interview answers and presentations late into the night. When she got discouraged, I built her back up. I thought I was supporting a future titan of industry. We got married at 25. I remember the ceremony clearly. Modest, tasteful, mostly friends and family. I genuinely believed I'd married a woman of substance. But marriage didn't change Melissa overnight. The shift was gradual, so subtle it was hard to notice at first. Like rain slowly seeping through the ceiling until one day the roof collapses. After graduation, she landed a job as an office manager at a small marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. She quit within 3 months. Her reason? Her boss didn't recognize her potential and had the nerve to ask her to make coffee before a client pitch. From then on, it was a revolving door of short-lived positions: part-time receptionist, administrative assistant, even a few freelance gigs she never followed through on. The pattern was always the same. Every job was beneath her, every boss sexist, every environment toxic. Meanwhile, I was grinding. I moved from grunt labor to crew leader, then assistant project manager. My days started before sunrise, drenched in sweat and stress before most people even finished breakfast. I didn't complain. I was proud of my work, and with every promotion came the hope that things would finally stabilize. That Melissa would eventually find her footing and match my effort. But that day never came. About 4 years into our marriage, we bought our first house. Well, I bought it. My savings, my name on the mortgage. It was a solid 3-bedroom in a quiet suburb with decent schools nearby. I wasn't thinking luxury, I was thinking future. A backyard for barbecues, maybe a couple of kids. But Melissa had different plans. From the moment we moved in, she fixated on renovations. The kitchen, she said, was tragically outdated. The master bathroom, she declared, needed a soaking tub, because every woman deserves a sanctuary. I agreed in theory, but when I offered to handle the upgrades myself, given that I managed construction projects for a living, she turned up her nose. "No offense," she said, "but I want this done right. We should hire someone." Translation: expensive contractors, fancy designers, and zero compromise. By the 5th year, I was managing 7-figure commercial developments, coordinating dozens of subcontractors, and keeping multi-million-dollar projects on schedule and within budget. My salary had doubled since our wedding. But instead of using the extra income to pay down the mortgage or build a nest egg, Melissa treated our joint account like her personal credit line. Most days I was up by 5, squeezing in a workout to keep my blood pressure from boiling over, and on site by 7. My days were chaos, solving disputes, handling permit delays, and juggling timelines. By the time I came home, I was drained in every possible way. My back screamed, my feet ached, and all I wanted was a warm meal and a few kind words from the woman I married. Instead, I'd walk into our living room and find her curled up on our leather couch, the one I paid for, watching reality shows about rich women who did nothing but shop and fight. She'd be surrounded by high-end shopping bags, scrolling Instagram, house would be a total wreck. Dishes stacked like a game of Jenga, laundry spilling out of baskets, trash full of half-eaten takeout. And when I asked about dinner, "Oh, I ordered DoorDash. Should be here in like 30 minutes. You can Venmo me your half." Venmo me my half? In a house where she paid no bills, wore clothes I bought, and used utilities I funded, she wanted reimbursement for lukewarm pad thai she ordered while I was out earning the money to pay for her lifestyle. The first few times I complied, too exhausted to start a fight, but each time I hit send, something inside me tightened, a bitterness I couldn't ignore. And as if that weren't enough, our intimacy had all but disappeared. When we first got married, we had a healthy sex life. Nothing wild, but affectionate, consistent. Now, once a month, if that, like she was doing me a favor. Everything in our relationship seemed to operate on her schedule, under her conditions. Over time, I started noticing a pattern, one that made my stomach twist. Melissa became especially affectionate whenever she was about to make a financial request. A soft kiss on the cheek, a gentle stroke on my arm, a slightly longer hug, all just preludes to, "I've been thinking, I need this new skincare line," or, "There's this event I simply can't miss." The manipulation was subtle but unmistakable. Even on the rare days she cooked, which, to be clear, were few and far between, she behaved like she'd accomplished some heroic feat. "I spent hours making this pasta, Jake," she'd declare with a dramatic flair. In reality, it was boxed spaghetti, poured out of a plastic container, served with store-bought marinara and frozen meatballs from Costco. Total cook time maybe 20 minutes max. I couldn't help but compare it to my mom who, despite working part-time as a school secretary and raising 3 rowdy boys, always had dinner hot and ready when my dad walked through the door. Now I wasn't longing for some retro apron-wearing June Cleaver J. Cleaver type wife. I'm fully capable of taking care of myself. Growing up with 2 brothers meant chores were a shared responsibility. I know how to scrub a toilet and cook a decent meal, but there's a difference between partnership and parasitism. I was pulling 12-hour shifts, commuting an hour each way, sacrificing sleep and peace of mind while Melissa was, what? Watching Netflix on our couch, browsing high-end fashion websites, gossiping over brunch with friends whose lives mirrored hers, funded either by indulgent husbands or trust funds. The moment that would break everything between us was already brewing beneath the surface. I just hadn't seen the cracks fully form. Not yet. It all reached its boiling point one Friday in July. I had just closed a monumental deal at work. This wasn't just another job. It was a major mixed-use development in the heart of downtown. We were talking serious square footage, heavy logistics, and chaotic supply chain delays that had tanked other projects across the region. But I'd pulled it off. Under budget, ahead of schedule. A damn near miracle in our industry. That afternoon, my boss called me into his office. He shook my hand, grinning with rare approval, and said something that made my heart race. "You're being strongly considered for senior project manager." That role wasn't just a title. It was a golden ticket. A leap into 6-figure territory. A recognition of every back-breaking hour I'd invested since I started as a day laborer straight out of community college. Driving home, my chest was pounding, not from stress, for once, but from pride. I stopped by this upscale bakery near the office, grabbed Melissa's favorite dessert, a slice of raspberry white chocolate cheesecake, and envisioned an evening of reconnection. Maybe this would be the spark we needed to rediscover our bond. Maybe she'd see me again, not just as a wallet or a workhorse, but as her husband, her teammate. I walked through the door just after 6:30 p.m. early by my standards, and called out, "Babe, I'm home. Got some amazing news." She was in the living room, draped across the couch like a queen in repose, phone in hand, eyes barely glancing up. Her greeting? "Hey, there's no food. I didn't think you'd be back this early." I held up the dessert like an olive branch. I thought we could celebrate. The downtown project came in under budget. Phillips is considering me for senior PM. She set her phone down and muttered, "Progress, I guess." Oh, that's nice. What does that mean exactly? I launched into the details. How rare this opportunity was, how the bonus alone could hit mid-five figures, how this was the culmination of years of grit. As I spoke, I saw her eyes drift, not with awe or pride, but with calculation. She wasn't hearing success or achievement. She was hearing spending potential. Her response was almost immediate. "That's perfect timing," she said, voice perking up. "There's this feminist podcast panel in Chicago this weekend. All the major voices in modern feminism will be there. Tickets are about $500, 0 cents. We'll need a hotel too, but with your bonus." I blinked. This weekend? I thought maybe we'd go out to dinner. Celebrate just us. Maybe Giovanni's? Her nose wrinkled. Giovanni? That place is so basic. Besides, this panel is important. It's about the modern female experience in corporate America. This could be huge for my network. That was it. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "What would you know about corporate America?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "You haven't held a job longer than 3 months in years." Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowed like slits of cold steel. "Excuse me?" "That's incredibly insensitive. You know how toxic those workplaces were. The microaggressions, the dismissiveness." I didn't let her finish. I set the cheesecake down with a firm thud. "We need to talk. Seriously." She sighed, melodramatically, flopping back onto the couch like I'd interrupted her spa day. "About what now?" "About this." I gestured at the cluttered living room, the takeout containers, the chaos. "About us. I feel like I'm carrying everything, financially, emotionally, while you're just cruising." Her look could have stopped a thunderstorm. "Are you seriously turning this into some patriarchal woman should do housework speech? I didn't marry you to be your maid or your chef. If you want someone to clean up after you, why don't you hire a maid with your big strong man money?" I swallowed hard. "This isn't about gender, Melissa. It's about partnership. I bust my ass every day. You don't contribute financially, domestically, or emotionally. Nothing." Her spine straightened like a rod of steel. "I contribute plenty," she hissed. "I manage our social calendar. I maintain connections with people who could help your career. Do you know how exhausting it is being a woman in this society? The emotional labor alone." "Emotional labor?" I cut her off, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Melissa, I know guys on my team who work on rooftops in July, risking heat stroke, just to provide for their families. They go home and still help with dishes and homework. Don't tell me this is about your gender. This is about you being lazy and entitled." Her voice shot up like a fire alarm. "Lazy? You think I'm lazy? Just because I'm not out rolling around in dirt with your construction buddies doesn't mean I'm not working. I keep up appearances. I uphold our image." I laughed bitterly. "The only image you're upholding is on Instagram, where you pretend to be this boss babe influencer while spending my money." She bolted up, face flushed with fury. "You're just intimidated by a strong woman who knows her worth. My father would never talk to my mother like this." "And your father," I replied flatly, "is a corporate attorney who brings in 7 figures. Your mother raised 3 kids while running a non-profit foundation. You seriously think this, you compares to that?" Bringing up her privileged upbringing was, admittedly, a low blow. I knew that. But in that moment I was too fed up to care. Her family had never fully accepted me. To them I was just the construction worker with a calloused handshake and an associate's degree. Hardly the match they envisioned for their sophisticated, ivy-dressed daughter. Sure, they'd paid for the wedding, but they'd also made sure I knew exactly what they thought of me. The message was loud and clear. Melissa was settling. Sometimes I wondered if she believed it too. Now here she was, glaring at me, like I'd just insulted her entire existence because I dared to ask for a little mutual effort in our marriage. "I can't believe you're attacking me like this," she hissed. "On a Friday night, no less, when all I wanted was a peaceful evening. This is borderline abusive." Without another word, she snatched her phone, turned on her heel, and stomped off. The bedroom door slammed so hard it rattled the pictures on the hallway wall. I stood there, still in my work boots, staring at the untouched dessert I'd brought home. The cheesecake that was supposed to mark a celebration now sat there like a cruel joke. I walked into the kitchen, popped open a can of soda, and stepped outside onto the back deck. The yard was dim under the fading twilight, but I could still make out every stone in the path I'd laid by hand, every flower bed I'd edged over weekends while Melissa was off getting facials and massages. I had poured love into this house, into our life together, even when it wasn't being returned. Sitting there, listening to the crickets and the distant hum of traffic, something shifted in me. This wasn't just a bad night. This wasn't a relationship in a rough patch. This was a pattern, a cycle, a trap. I was funding a lifestyle for someone who gave nothing back but grief, someone who seemed to take pride in punishing me for daring to expect reciprocity. And in that moment of clarity, as the sky turned indigo, the answer hit me like a gut punch. I couldn't do this anymore. Not for another 40 years. Not for another month. That night, I crashed on the couch. No shouting match, no final confrontation. I was done playing her game. The next morning, I woke up stiff and groggy to the quiet hum of an empty house. Melissa had already left, probably off to brunch or some retail therapy session, her favorite form of warfare. Her absence wasn't a coincidence. It was strategic, her passive-aggressive way of punishing me for standing up to her. My phone buzzed with a notification. $600, 0 cents, spent at Nordstrom at 8:15. IMM. Message received. Cross me, and I'll bleed you dry. What she didn't know was that I had already made up my mind. The bank account wasn't the only thing that was about to change. That weekend, she barely acknowledged me. The silent treatment reigned supreme, broken only by snide remarks or exaggerated sighs. On Saturday evening, she came waltzing through the front door with armfuls of shopping bags, designer logos prominently displayed, making sure I saw every single one. She caught my eye as she carried them up the stairs and said sweetly, "Well, since I'm so worthless, I figured I'd treat myself to something nice. Self-care, right?" She held up her phone to flash another $400, 0 cents charge from some boutique I didn't recognize. Sunday morning, she floated into the kitchen in full glam, announcing, "Going to brunch with the girls. Might hit the spa after, so don't wait up." I didn't argue. I just nodded, already halfway through the blueprint in my head. Managing large construction projects teaches you a lot. You don't demo a wall without first understanding what it's holding up. You assess every beam, every joint. You make a plan, you act with precision. So while Melissa was out getting mimosas and massages, I got to work on the project that mattered most, dismantling the toxic life we'd built together. I pulled up our financial records, really dug into them for the first time in months. What I found turned my stomach. We had less than $5,000, 0 cents, in savings, despite my healthy income. Our credit card debt had ballooned to over $30,000, 0 cents, spread across 6 different cards. The bulk of it, clothing stores, spas, restaurants, and high-end beauty products. She'd secretly opened a Nordstrom store card in her name, linked to our joint checking account, and maxed it out at $500, 0 cents. She was making minimum payments each month, draining our shared funds to cover the interest. I combed through our statements for the last half year. Melissa was spending close to $6,000, 0 cents a month, nearly all of it on indulgences, Uber Eats, Sephora, nail salons, high-end skincare, boutique yoga classes. The list was endless. Meanwhile, I hadn't bought myself a new pair of work boots in over a year. My gym bag had holes in it. That fishing trip with my dad I'd been talking about for years kept getting postponed. "We don't have the extra money right now, babe," she'd say. Right. That evening, while she soaked in the tub, using one of the overpriced bath bombs I'd bought her for Christmas, I sat down with my laptop and took action. First, I transferred the majority of our joint funds into a new individual account under my name. I left just enough to cover the mortgage and basic utilities for the next month. Next, I canceled all her credit cards except one. I set a strict weekly limit of $200, 0 cents on it, barely enough for gas and groceries. Then I activated purchase alerts for anything over $50, 0 cents. I wanted to know exactly when and where she tried to test me. On a hunch, I also checked our cell phone bill. There, in black and white, were dozens of late-night texts to a number I didn't recognize. I didn't read the messages. I didn't need to. Just logged the number and stored it in the back of my mind. About an hour later, she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, glowing from her steam-filled escape. She picked up her phone, and then it happened. The screaming started almost instantly. "What the hell did you do?" she shrieked, storming into the living room, holding her phone like it was evidence in a courtroom. "My cards aren't working. Everything's getting declined." I didn't move from the couch. Baseball was on. I didn't even mute it. "I adjusted your spending limits," I said calmly, "to match your contribution to this household." Her face went from confusion to disbelief, then through a spectrum of rage. "You can't do that. That's financial abuse. I'll call my sister's friend. She's a women's rights lawyer. You're violating my autonomy." I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm protecting mine." "Go ahead," I said, surprised at how calm my voice was despite the chaos swirling between us. "Tell a judge how your husband is paying every single bill while you spend thousands on designer bags is somehow abuse. See how that plays out. And while you're at it, explain why you haven't held a job longer than 3 months in years." Melissa's eyes darkened and her voice turned venomous. "You're a controlling bastard. A real man would never treat his wife like this." I stood up slowly, towering over her, nearly a foot taller. I wasn't trying to intimidate her, but I wasn't backing down either. "No," I said, firm and clear. "A real man wouldn't let his wife walk all over him anymore. You want to live like royalty? Then start pulling your weight like a partner." It was the first time in our entire relationship that I'd seen Melissa rendered speechless. Her lips parted, then closed. She opened them again, trying to form words, but nothing came out. A beat passed, then she turned sharply, storming off toward the bathroom. The door slammed behind her with such force, it knocked a photo off the wall. I heard it hit the floor with a dull thud, but didn't bother picking it up. That night, she retreated to the guest room, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept well. Deep, uninterrupted sleep. No tension. No dread of the next emotional ambush. The following morning, before I left for work, I scribbled a note and left it on the kitchen counter. It was simple, direct, like a policy memo. "Melissa, I've created a new budget that reflects our actual income and expenses. Your card is now capped at $200, 0 cents a week. If you want more spending power, get a job. If you decide to contribute to this household financially or by maintaining our home, we can revisit the limits. Until then, this is final." That evening, I walked in to find the note shredded into confetti on the kitchen counter. Melissa wasn't home and I didn't wait up. She rolled in sometime past midnight. No apology, no explanation, just the beginning of a Cold War. The weeks that followed revealed the truth I hadn't wanted to face before. Without the constant stream of my income flowing unchecked into her hands, Melissa began to unravel. Outwardly, she was still posting her empowerment quotes on social media. "Know your worth, don't settle, strong women rise." The usual carousel of filtered confidence. But behind closed doors, she was anything but strong. She couldn't handle not having instant access to luxury. She whined, she sulked, she lashed out. She even tried manipulation. One morning, she groaned over coffee. "My friends invited me to brunch at Westfield's. What am I supposed to tell them? That my husband too cheap to let me go?" Westfield's was one of those trendy downtown brunch spots that charged more for a slice of avocado toast than I spent on lunch in a week. I was packing my meals now to save money. No more overpriced deli sandwiches on site. "Tell them whatever you want," I replied, casually zipping up my lunch bag. "Or better yet, pay for your brunch. You know, with the money you earned." She looked at me like I'd suggested she go mine for coal. "A job. You know how I feel about the exploitative nature of capitalism." I had to suppress a laugh. This is coming from the woman who owned 13 luxury handbags, each one purchased with the very capital she so despised. "Funny," I said. "You don't seem to mind exploitation when it buys you Louis Vuitton." She cycled through every tactic: tears, tantrums, icy silence. She even tried to seduce me one night, slinking up beside me on the couch after weeks of physical distance. But I wasn't playing along anymore. I wasn't rewarding her behavior with intimacy. When none of that worked, she escalated to smear tactics. She began telling her friends, especially the ones from her feminist circle, that I was abusive, that I was financially controlling her. Suddenly, my phone was lighting up with messages about toxic masculinity and coercive control. One even accused me of fearing strong women. That one made me laugh out loud. There was nothing strong about throwing a tantrum because your spending got capped. That wasn't empowerment, it was entitlement. Then came the so-called intervention. I came home late one evening to find Melissa seated in the living room with 3 of her friends, Amber, Rachel, and Kayla. Amber, bitter and twice divorced, never missed an opportunity to bash men. Rachel ran a barely functioning wellness brand funded entirely by her parents, and Kayla, ironically the only one with a real job, was cheating on her husband, a detail Melissa drunkenly shared months ago. As soon as I stepped in, Amber took charge. "Jake, we're concerned about Melissa," she said, like she was leading a support group meeting. "She's told us about your financial control. It's alarming." I set my lunchbox on the counter, still wearing my steel-toed boots and fluorescent vest. "That's an interesting take." "She has a right to financial independence," Rachel added with a solemn nod. "What you're doing is classic abuse." I turned to Melissa, who sat there with a self-satisfied look like she'd finally outmaneuvered me. But I wasn't rattled. "You know what? You're right. Melissa does deserve financial independence. She should get a job, earn her own money, spend it however she wants. That's what independence means, doesn't it?" Kayla looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. It's not that simple, Jake. Marriage is a partnership. Your income is joint. I let out a humorless chuckle. Funny how it's our money when she's spending it. But when I'm out there working 60-hour weeks, it's just expected to flow one way. I looked at them, one by one. Tell me this, if I quit my job tomorrow, spent my days on the couch ordering takeout and shopping online, while Melissa worked full-time to cover everything, would you be here defending my right to that joint income? That shut them up for a beat. The smugness faded from Melissa's face. She tried to recover, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. You're twisting this, Jake. I contribute in other ways. The emotional labor alone. I cut her off. That phrase again. Emotional labor. What does that even mean in this context? Because from where I stand, I go to work, I come home, I cook my food, I wash my clothes, and I get no emotional support from you? You're not lifting me, Melissa. You're dragging me down. So, Melissa, I said, keeping my voice level, why don't you explain to all of us exactly what kind of labor you're contributing to this household? The room fell silent, not just quiet, dead. No one moved. Melissa avoided eye contact. Her friends shifted uncomfortably. The silence stretched longer than I expected, and when no answer came, the tension finally broke as Ember stood up, clutching her designer purse, probably paid for by the generous alimony from her second divorce. We're not going to stay here and watch you verbally abuse our friend, she declared dramatically. Come on, Melissa, you can stay with me tonight. I didn't flinch. Fine by me. Might want to pack a bag, though. Amber's one-bedroom condo might feel a little cramped after the first week. They left in a storm of indignation and self-righteous huffs. Melissa paused just long enough to grab a duffel, toss in some clothes, her skincare routine, and her toothbrush. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then, I leaned against the wood for a moment, soaking in the rare sensation of silence. The kind of silence that felt like freedom. For the first time in months, hell, maybe years, I felt peace in my own home. About a month passed in this new, quieter reality. I was adapting. Sleeping better, cooking simpler meals, cleaning on weekends. Life was manageable, even refreshing. But it didn't last. One Thursday, a surprise schedule change brought me home early. A delayed concrete shipment had brought our project to a temporary halt. I pulled into the driveway, expecting an empty house. Instead, I found Melissa in our bedroom, my side of the closet specifically. She jumped when I walked in. Her hand was clutching a small velvet box. Inside it was the vintage Omega wristwatch my grandfather had left me, the last thing he gave me before he passed. It wasn't worth a fortune, maybe a couple thousand at best, but it was priceless to me. What are you doing? I asked, voice low, dangerously quiet. She turned, clearly caught red-handed. Her expression flickered from guilt to irritation, then to that practiced defiance. I was just looking at it. No, I said, you were trying to take it. She scoffed, cheeks reddening. Fine, I was going to sell it on eBay. I have a hair appointment tomorrow, and you've been completely unreasonable about this budget. I have standards to maintain. I stood frozen for a second, staring at this woman who once told me she loved me, now ready to hawk a family heirloom for highlights and lowlights. Give me the watch, I said, extending my hand. She hesitated, then slapped it into my palm with a huff. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. It's just a watch. No, I replied, you're being a thief. And that watch is the only thing I have left of my grandfather. But that doesn't matter to you, does it? Because it's not about family or history or sentiment. It's about you. It's always about you. Oh, please, she said, rolling her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. That night I removed the watch and every other valuable heirloom or irreplaceable item from the house and put them in a safe deposit box at the bank. I didn't trust her. And that wasn't paranoia. That was reality. Lying in bed in the guest room, my new permanent space, I finally accepted what I had been avoiding. This marriage wasn't broken. It was done. The person I married either never existed or had become someone I no longer recognized. And I wasn't going to just bow out quietly. No. If it were ending, it would end on my terms. 6 weeks into our new budgeting era, the cracks in Melissa's well-crafted persona were becoming painfully obvious. Her blonde highlights were fading into brunette roots. Her manicured nails were chipped. Her outfits, once a daily rotation of new labels, started repeating. The shine was wearing off. She'd tried staying at Amber's place, but that lasted less than a week. She came back, claiming they needed space, but I knew the truth. Amber's hospitality had an expiration date once Melissa stopped footing half the bill for wine nights and takeout sushi. One evening, I overheard her on the phone, hiding in the bathroom, assuming the running shower would mask her voice, but our bathroom vent led straight to the guest room vent. Every word was crystal clear. "It's so humiliating," she whispered. "He's treating me like some kind of gold digger, after everything I've sacrificed for this marriage." I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to keep from laughing out loud. Sacrificed? Melissa's idea of sacrifice was missing a spa day? "No, I've tried," she continued. "He just doesn't understand. Being a wife is a full-time job. The emotional labor alone should be worth a paycheck." There it was again. Emotional labor. I'd looked it up after she first threw the term at me during one of our fights. According to what I found, it meant handling the unseen tasks, keeping track of appointments, birthdays, bills, organizing social functions, and managing household harmony. A valid concept, absolutely, but in our house, that was all me. I remembered her mother's birthday. I scheduled our HVAC maintenance every fall. I was the one who kept track of when we needed paper towels and trash bags. Melissa didn't even know which bank held our mortgage. "Well, I can't just leave," she whispered on the phone. "The house isn't in my name, and I've got nowhere to go. My parents already said they won't bail me out again, not after the credit card fiasco." I froze. Credit card fiasco? What fiasco? This was news to me. But it explained why her parents were so frosty at Christmas last year, handing out lectures instead of gift cards. I know, she said into the phone. "I'm working on him. He'll cave. Guys like him always feel guilty. I just need to act sweet for a while. Make him think I'm trying." And that was the moment I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. That night I started documenting everything. I took photos of the house when I left, and again when I returned, proving that no chores had been done. I saved every receipt for groceries, utilities, and repairs I paid for alone. I even began recording conversations when she'd demand more spending money while still refusing to apply for jobs. Was it petty? Maybe, but I had a sinking feeling I'd need proof when this crumbled. Then came the final straw. I got a call from our credit card provider, specifically the joint account we hadn't used in over a year. There had been suspicious activity. Someone had attempted to open a new card, in my name. They flagged the application because the listed information didn't match my usual submission pattern. I knew immediately who it was: Melissa. It was nothing short of identity theft. She'd tried to open a credit card in my name, without telling me, without consent, without remorse. When I confronted her, her reaction wasn't guilt, it was mockery. "Oh, come on," she scoffed. "It's not like we're strangers. We're married. What's yours is mine, remember? You literally said that in our vows." I stared at her in disbelief. "I also vowed to love and cherish you. Funny how you only seem to remember the parts that benefit you." That night, I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. The next morning, I opened a new checking account at a completely different bank and redirected my direct deposit. I left just enough money in our shared account to cover the mortgage and essential bills, but nothing more. If she wanted her frivolous spending habits back, she'd have to fund them herself. I also installed a small security camera in our living room. Not hidden, not sneaky. It sat right there on the bookshelf, beside our wedding photo, no less. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. When Melissa noticed it, she flipped. "What the hell is that?" she demanded. "Security," I replied evenly. "Given your recent behavior, I want to make sure nothing else mysteriously disappears from this house." Her eyes went wide with fury. "This is a violation of privacy, of trust." I looked her straight in the eyes. "You attempted to steal my identity to get a credit card. Trust doesn't live here anymore. It moved out the day you tried to become me on paper." As I dug deeper, I discovered she'd also been exchanging flirty messages with her ex-boyfriend from college, the trust fund golden boy her parents had always approved of, the one who dumped her during senior year, ironically enough. Their texts were full of her self-pity. "Jake doesn't understand me. I miss what we had. Maybe I made a mistake." I didn't confront her. I didn't rage or accuse. I just filed the screenshots in my growing archive of evidence. What Melissa didn't know was that I'd already met with a divorce attorney, a tough-as-nails woman who specialized in high-conflict cases. She was blunt, efficient, and unshakable. She gave me one piece of advice that stuck. "Do not leave the house. The biggest mistake men make is moving out before legal proceedings begin," she told me. "Stay put, keep records. Don't do anything that could be framed as abandonment." So I stayed. I stayed in that house. I kept documenting. I waited. 3 months into our new financial arrangement, Melissa began to crack. Her old tactics, crying, guilt-tripping, accusing me of misogyny, had lost their edge, so she shifted strategies. She tried being nice. Suddenly she was making dinner. It was always overcooked or cold or borderline inedible, but she tried. She started vacuuming, wiping counters, and taking out the trash. Poorly done, sure, but noticeable. She even tried to initiate sex, something she hadn't done in months. I turned her down, politely but firmly. I couldn't fake intimacy with someone who had shown me, repeatedly, how little they valued me. Every time something didn't go her way, the act would slip. Like the night she cleaned the kitchen but left moldy takeout in the fridge. When I pointed it out, she exploded. "At least I tried, Jake. God, nothing is ever good enough for you." But I wasn't the same man she used to manipulate. I had started working out again, 5 a.m. gym sessions before work, eating cleaner, and dropped 15 pounds. My shoulders loosened, my mood lifted, the weight of her constant disappointment and entitlement had started to fall away. I also reconnected with old friends. Guys she'd slowly edged out of my life because they were too blue-collar, too simple. My construction crew buddies. Caller, a high school friend turned cop. My cousin Eddie, who lived in a trailer but had more heart than anyone I knew. I felt like myself again. All the while, my lawyer was quietly building our case. I'd provided her with bank statements showing Melissa's reckless spending. Footage proved she contributed almost nothing to the house. Texts with her ex, evidence of identity theft. Every brick of documentation was being laid, one by one, to build my legal escape route. Fortunately, I'd bought the house before we got married. My name was the only one on the title. Melissa had never contributed to the down payment, never made a mortgage payment. My retirement accounts were protected as premarital assets. The credit card debt was murkier, but my attorney was optimistic. She believed the mountain of evidence could justify an uneven asset division, despite our state's typical 50/50 default. Then came the final test. One evening, not long after sunset, Melissa approached me with tears in her eyes and a tremble in her voice. "Jake," she said softly, "I know I've been awful. You were right about everything. I've been selfish, entitled. I took you for granted." She sniffled. "Please, can we try again? I miss you. I'll get a job. I'll do better. I swear." For a split second, I hesitated. She sounded genuine. Her voice broke in all the right places. Her eyes shimmered. It almost worked. But then, just as she reached for my hand, her phone lit up on the coffee table. She'd left it face up. The notification was from a dating app. She was already shopping for her next meal ticket. I forced a smile. "I miss us too," I said, keeping my tone light. "Maybe we can work this out." The relief that flooded her face was almost laughable. Her shoulders relaxed, her lip curled into that familiar smile she used when she thought she'd won. "Really?" she said, her voice filled with hope. "Oh, Jake, thank you. I promise. This time will be different." She moved to hug me. I returned it, barely. "We should talk about how we move forward," I said, pulling back. "Make a real plan." She nodded eagerly. "Yes, of course. Whatever you want." "For starters," I said, watching her reaction closely, "I think you should get a job, something reliable. Benefits would be great. Retail, food service, whatever's available. It's a place to start." The smile on her face began to falter. There it was, the briefest flicker of revulsion before she caught herself. Melissa was good at masking her emotions, but she couldn't hide that first reflexive look of disdain when I brought up employment. "Of course," she said quickly, voice syrupy. "I've been checking out a few administrative roles. I mean, I do have a business degree, right? That should open some doors." "Perfect," I replied, "and maybe we should work out a chore schedule for the house, too, something that evenly splits responsibilities." Another flash of irritation before she composed herself. "Sure. I mean, I was never really taught how to clean properly. I just never got the hang of it." "I can teach you," I said with a flat smile. "It's not rocket science." For the next couple of days we played the game. I'd suggest fair, reasonable partnership expectations and she'd agree with them in words, while her body language told the truth. She hated every second, every list, every task. Every mention of balance and equity grated on her like nails on a chalkboard. That night, as I got up to head to the guest room, she tried one last move. "You could sleep in our room tonight," she offered, her voice soft, a faintly seductive look on her face. One that might have worked on me a year ago. "I think we should take it slow," I replied. "Rebuild trust before we get back to anything physical." Her smile faltered for a second. Of course. Whatever you need. I closed the door behind me and allowed myself a small grin. She thought she was back in control. She had no idea the endgame had already begun. 2 days later, I took a personal day from work. I told Melissa I had back-to-back meetings all day and would be home late. "Don't wait up," I said casually. She believed me. Why wouldn't she? I'd never given her a reason not to. She was planning to go shopping with the small allowance she'd earned by actually cleaning for once. "Just some basics," she'd said. "Toilet paper, groceries, nothing extravagant." I smiled and even bumped up her card limit a little to reinforce the illusion. I needed her out of the house. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., the moving crew arrived. 4 of my guys from the construction site, solid men, loyal, discreet. I'd already packed most of my things gradually over the past week, sneaking out boxes in my truck and delivering them to a new apartment I'd secured near my job site. "Just grab the stuff with the blue tape," I told the crew. "Leave the rest." Everything I marked was mine, stuff I'd bought before we married, inherited from family, or purchased with receipts in my name. The giant flat screen? Hers. The sectional couch she claimed was necessary for entertaining? Also staying. But my dad's recliner, my garage workbench, my free weights and my road bike? Those were coming with me. The new place wasn't anything fancy, a one-bedroom with laminate floors and a tiny balcony that overlooked a public park, but it was paid 3 months ahead, clean, quiet, and most importantly, it was mine. She had no idea it existed. As the crew worked, I walked through the house one final time, checking closets and drawers for anything personal. In the master closet, I stared at the designer outfits Melissa had insisted I wear. Tight-fitting dress shirts, Italian loafers, preppy sweaters that never fit my build. I left them all behind. I wouldn't wear her version of me anymore. By noon, the moving truck was loaded and gone. The house looked half-live, empty of substance, but still staged with her illusions. 7 years of my life had played out in those rooms. Not every memory was bad. There had been laughter once, hope, but that was long ago. In the kitchen, I placed 3 things on the counter: a stack of divorce papers with my signature already in place, a USB flash drive containing every photo, screenshot, video, and receipt I'd collected, and a printed letter. The letter wasn't a rant or a list of accusations. It was calm, clear, and exact. I detailed her behavior, how her entitlement, manipulation, emotional neglect, and financial recklessness had eroded the foundation of our marriage. I explained that I didn't hate her, but I also couldn't trust her. That trust, once gone, was nearly impossible to recover. I closed it with a wish that she finds whatever she's looking for in life. Before I left, I looked one last time at our wedding photo still sitting on the bookshelf. We were smiling, radiant even. 2 people in love. Or so I thought. "What happened to them?" I whispered. Then I removed my house key from my key ring, placed it beside the papers, set down my wedding ring next to it, and walked out the door without looking back. I turned off my phone, climbed into my truck, and drove straight to Mike's cabin 3 hours north in the woods. Mike had been one of the first to know what I'd been going through, and when I told him it was finally time, he offered up his place without hesitation. "You're going to need space," he said. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere she won't find you right away." He was right. That weekend I fished off the dock, sat around the fire pit, drank a few beers, and slept deeper than I had in years. There were no angry texts, no lectures, no fake apologies, no pretending, just peace. When I finally turned my phone back on late Sunday night, the flood began. 87 missed calls, over 130 text messages, 23 voicemails. All from Melissa and her inner circle. I played just one. It was her, sobbing, panicked. "Jake, please. Please don't do this to me. I don't have anywhere to go. The landlord says I have 30 days to move out. I don't have the money. You terminated the lease. It was in your name. Please call me. We can fix this." See, the house we'd lived in, the one she told everyone I had bought for us, that was a lie. I'd been renting it the whole time, saving quietly for a down payment on a real home someday, one I'd imagined we'd share. But as it turned out, that home would never have included her. That future didn't exist. The landlord, an old-timer who'd known me since I was just a foreman starting out, was sympathetic. When I explained everything, he didn't ask questions. He just nodded, thanked me for being upfront, and started the formal notice. Melissa had 30 days to figure out her next move. The landlord had agreed to let me terminate the lease early, an arrangement he offered without hesitation once I explained the circumstances, but he also granted Melissa a 30-day grace period to find a new place. That seemed fair, though I doubted she'd appreciate it. As I sat on the porch of my new home, a cold beer in hand and my phone buzzing incessantly on the table beside me, I finally gave in and scrolled through the flood of messages she'd been sending. Each one was more frantic than the last. "Jake, please, just pick up. Where are you? You can't leave me like this. At least tell me where you took my stuff." Another ping, and another ping. "Did you really believe I was flirting with Brad? It wasn't what it looked like, I swear. You're being paranoid." Then, as if trying a different tactic, came the threats. "If you don't answer, I'll call the police. The landlord just told me we're getting evicted. What the hell did you do?" She shifted gears again. "My attorney says what you've done is illegal. You can't just cut me off like this. Jake, I'm scared. I don't have anywhere to go." The texts from her friends were even more aggressive. "You piece of garbage, we always knew you weren't good enough for her. You'll pay for this. Domestic abuse isn't a joke. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. You think walking away makes you a man?" I didn't reply to a single one. I just blocked them one by one. Then I sent a single, short text to my lawyer. "She's seen the divorce papers. Expect her to reach out tomorrow." Over the following week, her messages came from different numbers. Her friends' phones, burner apps, even email. They fluctuated from vitriol to victimhood, each one a transparent attempt to guilt or scare me into reversing course. But nothing would change my mind. Eventually, my lawyer sent cease and desist letters to her more vocal allies. Funny how quickly their feminist crusade fizzled out once real legal consequences entered the picture. One by one, the digital mob disappeared. Then 2 weeks after I'd left, the final message came. This one stood out. It was quieter, different. "Jake, I get it now," it began. "I really messed everything up. You were right about all of it." She went on to say she'd applied for a few jobs, 3 to be exact, and that she was staying with Amber, who had already started hinting she needed to chip in for groceries and utilities. "I never realized how much you did for me," she wrote. "I took you for granted, and I'm so sorry." The last part of the message was a plea. "If you could just help me with a little money, maybe loan me enough for a deposit on a studio apartment, I swear I'll pay you back. I just need a chance, please." I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed out the only reply she'd ever get from me again. "Sounds like you're finally learning what it means to be an independent adult. Congratulations on the growth. The divorce will be finalized in 60 days. Please don't contact me again." And with that, I blocked her number permanently. The fallout from there went about as smoothly as I could have hoped. My lawyer, a powerhouse of a woman with a taste for ruthless efficiency, dismantled every half-hearted legal claim her hastily hired attorney tried to make. They argued Melissa deserved half of everything because she'd supported my career and maintained our home. The judge, a seasoned man with decades of courtroom experience, actually laughed when we presented photographic evidence of the state of the house, our bank statements, and records of her spending habits. We showed that she had spent over $12,000, 0 cents, in 1 year alone at salons, spas, and boutiques. More than she'd ever contributed to any joint account or household expense in 7 years of marriage. In the end, we reached a settlement. I took on the debt she'd accumulated, around $25,000, 0 cents, some of which I'd already paid down just to keep the credit score from tanking. In exchange, she forfeited all claims to my retirement accounts, future earnings, or any additional spousal support. She kept her car, technically in her name, though I'd paid for every cent, and her clothes, a few pieces of furniture, and whatever dignity she could still muster. I got my freedom. 6 months have passed since the judge stamped those final papers, and I haven't looked back once. I bought a modest house near my new project site, nothing extravagant, just a clean, solid 2-bedroom ranch with a tidy yard and space for a small workshop out back. Paid for with the long-overdue bonus from the downtown project and the down payment I'd secretly stashed away while Melissa spent freely. It's quiet here. Always tidy, always peaceful. No Instagrammable pillows, no ridiculous quote art framed on the walls, just wood, stone, steel. A leather couch that's actually comfortable, and the freedom to toss my boots by the door without being told. They clash with the aesthetic. Life, as it turns out, is much better when you share it with someone who values hard work, respect, and genuine partnership. I've started dating again, nothing serious, but I met a woman named Sarah at a buddy's backyard barbecue. She's a nurse who works 12-hour shifts, knows how to rotate her own tires, and when the bill came on our first date, she didn't hesitate to reach for her half. Just that small gesture told me more than any speech ever could.